Aleksander Barkov, the gold standard when it comes to two-way play for forwards in the NHL, has won his second Selke Trophy. In 2024, it was in run-away fashion.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Monday, May 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12, follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. You can find this podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. So, Florida Panther fans, grateful to have you guys back here after a weekend full of no games for the Florida Panthers, avoiding a Game 7 and getting back for the Panthers. They're back at practice later today from Fort Lauderdale, too. But, Panthers back in the Eastern Conference Final, second straight year, third time in franchise history. So, this is the opportunity for the South Florida, now that the Panthers are at the forefront of everything when it comes to sports in South Florida, which means a lot of attention is on them, which means new fans once again. And this is a part of the show in the beginning now where the Florida Panthers are to tell you a little bit of a reintroduction of myself too, for those who are listening to the podcast for the first time. From South Florida, born and raised in downtown Miami, Mercy Hospital, and raised in West Kendall. Very, very, very proud to be from that region of South Florida. Shout out to specifically those people who are from the Hammocks area too. As after once I turned into an adult, interned in golf television for 4 years, then ended up getting a job there for the last for 4 years after that, and then after 2020, transitioned my golf work to hockey. Now that I've been hosting this podcast now for the last 3 years, January 2021. Crazy how time goes so fast. So the last 12 years spent in sports media, and very thankful really to be covering the hometown team in the Florida Panthers, the home region, in back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals appearances, and hoping for the Panthers obviously to get back to the Stanley Cup final and finally get their first chip. So this is the time where more fans are coming, and for those who are new fans who are jumping onto this show for the first time, welcome. By the way, around this time 12 years ago was the time that I started getting into the sport of hockey due to the Panthers breaking their 12-year playoff drought. So just like that for me, I'm sure there's a lot of you in that same position this year, and even some of you last year who jumped on the bandwagon, and everyone in South Florida is definitely welcome. South Florida loves a winner, even though there's a lot of attendance jokes and people and also all that talk from national media, which, by the way, Boston fans left early, and also New York Knicks fans left early too, after the New York Knicks got destroyed by the Indiana Pacers last night. So just South Florida is not the only place that happens in. So just want to let you guys know, and even for the Rangers fans listening too, who might stop by here. Not the only region. Not South Florida is not the only place. But to the big topic at hand for the show, Aleksander Barkov wins the Selke Trophy for the second time in his career. First time came in 2021 during that COVID-shortened season, the 56-game season, where the teams in a little bit of pods of 8, you faced them 8 times, if I remember correctly. If you were in the North Division, which had 7 teams, the All-Canadian Division, you faced some of those teams 10 times, some of them 9. It was all out of whack in that one for the NHL, and obviously that was before Seattle came around too. So there's still 31 teams, 3 divisions of 8, 1 of 7. But going back to Aleksander Barkov and the example that he set, I mean, the points didn't come until later in his career. I mean, listen. I mean, it's been 8 years since Jaromir Jagr has been with the franchise, and his impact on someone like Aleksander Barkov and helping him mature and grow as a player has really helped. And it's funny because I haven't even mentioned Jagr's name on the podcast in such a long time too, but it's still the growth from that point to now and getting that Selke Trophy in 2021, taking a leadership role, him maturing. I mean, he's in his late 20s. He's in the middle of his prime. And also the conversation from Aleksander Barkov of him going to the front office and saying, if you don't get me any help, I might not sign long term here. And that was really a big sense of urgency for someone like Vinny Viola, Matthew Caldwell, Bill Zito at the time, even though Bill Zito didn't draft Aleksander Barkov too. But also to keep them competitive. And again, this is a franchise that has 3 players remaining from the 2020 bubble when Dale Talon was in his last year as the general manager. And to do this big turnaround without rebuilding and still getting guys who were afterthoughts on different teams like Sam Bennett, Carter Verhaeghe, Brandon Montour, and also helping along Aleksander Barkov has really helped him blossom his individual talent, which has always been there, but also with helping complement that with line mates like a Sam Reinhart, which Barkov ran away with 165 of 194 votes from the PHWA. And Reinhart got the second most first place votes. He finished 4th overall behind Austin Matthews and Jordan Stahl, but second most first place votes. And he tied in total points with Andrei Kopitar, who's won the Selke in his career. So that duo of Aleksander Barkov, Sam Reinhart together, especially on that second unit on the penalty kill, which the logic is to have the second unit there towards the end of the opposition's power play 1 is to help get that rush going up the ice where power play 1 on the other side has a little bit more time on ice, and that you could possibly catch them napping too. So really for them as that duo on the penalty kill, it's lethal. Sam Reinhart's got 5 shorthanded goals on the season too. So that's really been just a great match on when it comes to that when the team does go shorthanded too. And Aleksander Barkov also he was messing around a little bit in the beginning of the season. He was actually talking about this on 32 Thoughts when Patrice Bergeron was set to retire, and it's like what's it gonna be now when now that Bergeron has now called it quits and now has hung up the skates. And Aleksander Barkov joked saying, quote, maybe my face-off percentage will go up a few percentage points, close quote. And funny enough, that came true for Mr. Selke. Yes, this era of Mr. Selke, which chances are this isn't going to be his last. And for honestly, with the reputation that Barkov has now, which the underrated conversation is over. The most underrated Panther is Gustav Forsling, which crazy to think that Bill Zito bought out Keith Yandel to protect Gustav Forsling too, and to keep him on, and then gave him a little bit of a deal after claiming him off waivers, and now signed him to the next 8 years. Which, let's also not forget, the clauses in his contract changed when Tkachuk and Barkov's contract fully expired too. So that offseason, which is 6 years from now, that's really that time where things could really reset for the Panthers. But you still have this window for the Panthers. But Barkov, what he does with getting on the back check, forecheck, muscling it out in the zone, he doubled the amount of hits of his previous career high. Faceoffs is 0.4% more than his previous career high too. We joke all about the whole Captain Goon, Paul Maurice specifically, and that's where all of us in the media ran with it, and fans. And the fact that he's more physical, he's going to the penalty box more, which, yeah, you see the PIM up more for Sasha Barkov, but if that means he's bringing a more physical game, which means finishing checks and getting a rush going up the ice, then you gotta absolutely enjoy that kind of play that comes from the captain too. So it's really when it comes to his prime, being a leader, and it goes to everything to less talk, more work on the ice, and that's everything that Sasha Barkov brings. And once again, big congratulations to him on getting the Selke Trophy for the second time in his career. And man, it's going to be years and years of just winning this over and over again. And once again, this is a trophy that is based on reputation too. So chances are, even before the season starts, even before puck drop begins in mid-October, you're going to hear the conversation once again of Aleksander Barkov being in the Selke conversation. And just for people who usually vote on the Selke with, again, PHWA, usually it's they look at the numbers, they look at some highlights, sample size, but Barkov, as someone who watches him every day, you see him with once again stick lifts too, and that's why we call him Silent Death here with me, Jacob, and Nick Fairbanks. So just the fact that he's able to just pick your pocket and while the opposition is trying to gain the zone, the picking of the pocket that Aleksander Barkov does really helps for the Panthers to just go up the ice and get a quick odd man rush too. And that's really everything that Barkov brings for the whole 200-foot game for the Cats. So congratulations to Sasha Barkov on another Selke Trophy. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're gonna go more into the conference final talk and continue to prepare you guys for the series that is coming up on Wednesday night. We're going to talk about this and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Policy Genius. And Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It saves you the time and money so you can provide your family with financial safety net starting today. Policy Genius helps you prepare for your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help you talk through it. Your work-life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's need. Policy Genius gives you the unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team. And they have no incentive to recommend one insurer over the other, so you can trust their guidance. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL or click on the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Back on this Monday, May 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Monday. And as you could tell in my voice, I am super pumped for today's show. And also, I'm just waiting for game 1 to just be here. It's all that's on my mind too. And honestly, with all the thoughts that I've had in my mind throughout the weekend and finally getting it on the podcast space to actually talk about it out loud, I'm letting off a lot right now. Plus, I've had 2 cups of espresso today, so Ventanita culture for everyone who who lives in South Florida. You know what that's all about too. So your boy is fired up today for today's show. So let's discuss more about the season series for the Florida Panthers versus the New York Rangers. A 2-1 in favor of the Panthers for them. First one came on December 29th. And for those who are new to the sport of hockey and to the NHL, expect every year when the 82-game schedule comes out for the New York Rangers to visit South Florida at the end of December. That's the thing. New York, Montreal, you'll see that on the schedule every single year as NHL trying to just create more revenue for tourists who want to come down to live a little, to escape the snow and get a little bit of their vacation. Plus, a lot of people own property down here. That's just the nature of the beast when it comes to the state of Florida, which is why you have a lot of away fans from different teams. It just is what it is for that. But the Florida Panthers, they won 4-3 in Florida on December 29th. 2 goals from Sam Reinhart, 1 from Erod, 1 from Evan Rodriguez. They did get 1 for 3 on the power play, but did give up a shorthanded goal. March 4th, Reinhart scores twice there. One of them on a give and go, one of them on and also one of them on a big highlight reel assist from Aleksander Barkov, who was fumbling the puck a little bit, tapped it in the air, and then got it to Sam Reinhart for that goal. One of the craziest goals that we've seen all season, and one that gets highlighted. That play, the pick six against Montreal back in November too. That's another one of Barkov's highlight reel plays. And then the last one, 4-3 for the New York Rangers against the Florida Panthers in a shootout. That game was without Barkov, Ekblad, and Forsling. And Florida, they got out to a 2-0 lead, even 3-2 towards the end of that game too. So Tobias Bjornfot made his Florida Panthers debut. Dmitry Kulikov was also had the second game of his 2-game suspension after the illegal check to the head of Connor Sheary too. But Sam Reinhart has feasted in this season series. Barkov too, Kachuk, Carter Verhaeghe too. For him, he's one that feasted in this season series. The power play for the Panthers in the series, 2 of 8. PK went 6 for 9. Also, Panthers let up a shorthanded goal in the first matchup too, and that's really dangerous because for the Panthers, two guys who could really destroy you on the rush, Artemi Panarin and Mika Zibanejad, and and when it comes to the Florida Panthers and their forechecking for them, that it's really what has gotten them to get into the net front. The Panthers, they've gotten to the net front a lot in this season series between them and New York. Jonathan Quick was the one who was in goal for the first game of this 3-game season series for the Rangers too, and he had a big highlight reel save with the left leg on Eetu Luostarinen in the first one too. But for the Panthers, really, that's what it's going to come down to for them. And also, the New York Rangers are more of a team that plays a lot of north-south hockey too. They're really great at that with their speed, and if you can disrupt them, and especially when it comes to their zone entries, man, you could create something in transition for them because their D is pretty up in the when they're in transition, especially neutral zone. You disrupt something, you get a little bit of a stretch, catch them on a change, and you're on a breakaway. But the New York Rangers, as far as their style, I think they're okay with giving up on the rush because of who they have back there. Igor Shesterkin, he is a 920. He has a 923 save percentage in these playoffs right now. He has a Vezina Trophy to his name too. So that what they have as their backstop in the postseason, they're not worried. They have multiple guys who could kill you. I mean, Chris Kreider, he's a net front presence on the power play too. I mean, he had a hat trick. Even his neighbors back in New York had a whole bunch of hats like dumped in his yard after his natural hat trick in Game 6 against the Carolina Hurricanes to clinch that second round series against them too. So lots of weapons there. Vincent Trocheck, a picture that's worth 1,000 words from his overtime winner in Game 1 of him screaming into the glass and against another former team of his in the Carolina Hurricanes, which crazy to think. That trade for Eetu Luostarinen for Vincent Trocheck back in 2020 at the deadline, which Trocheck didn't really get along with Joe Quenneville. Dale Talon was on his last trade deadline, so he had to make some tough decisions. And look what's happened with that trade. Eetu Luostarinen, one of the guys who were included in the trade, gets an extension, and it's a big part of that bottom six for the Cats too. And we'll get a lot of Eetu Luostarinen talk later in the program, and even into Wednesday show when we bring in John Chick of Locked On New York Rangers too, because there's gonna be some it's gonna be some really interesting to see what kind of role Eetu Luostarinen plays with everything that's going on with Sam Bennett too, and we'll get more into that later. But I spoke about Trocheck, 14 points in the playoffs right now, which he's their second leading goal scorer. He's taking key draws for the New York Rangers too, and their road to the Eastern Conference Final a little bit easier than the Florida Panthers. Not gonna knock them for it. You are the President's Trophy winners. You face off against the Washington Capitals team that has a -37, I believe it was, goal differential going into the postseason. It was a match of whoever Washington was facing. It wasn't going to be a long series too. So I mean, and think about it, for the Florida Panthers in that last game where they were missing everybody, at that time they were still 3 points behind the New York Rangers. So it was really a big fight until the end, right before that 2-7-1 stretch for the Panthers, which, funny enough, after that game in New York, Panthers got back on their feet on the second end of a back-to-back in Philadelphia too. So multiple times, regular season and postseason, we've seen the Florida Panthers bounce back multiple times. And also a little bit of an advantage that the Florida Panthers do have at 5-on-5, which in the postseason, the numbers for the Panthers are Corsi. They are 54% for which is, someone asked what Corsi meant. Shot attempts. If you hear me say Corsi, shot attempts. 548 to 462 at 5-on-5, 54% for the Florida Panthers. For the New York Rangers, they are, I'm scrolling up as I wrote this down in my notes, 45% too. So, and the only forward pair who's over 56, who is over a 50% Corsi is that Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere line, which Lafreniere has been a great story, and everyone was calling him a bust in the first few seasons. It's crazy to think that the Florida Panthers could have also had Alexi Lafreniere due to that second phase of the draft lottery, which the ball was dropped prematurely from the Rangers, picked back up and put back in too. But that's neither here nor there for the Panthers. But hey, the Florida Panthers got Anton Lundell in that draft, and honestly, you can't with the role that Lundell is playing, he's going to get a decent payday in the offseason. He's proving himself. If you're Bill Zito, you're thinking rats when it comes, no pun intended, when it comes to what you're going to have to pay him. But also, you're very encouraged that he's taking that next step to help this team get to their Stanley Cup. And also for the Panthers, that's really 5-on-5 is really what's going to help them if they're really going to come out of this series too. And also, New York power play, they can move the puck low to high, get that cross ice feed where the Florida Panthers have been great at taking that away, and that's really going to be the key. Florida has gotten into the net front on the power play, like I mentioned earlier, but man, the New York Rangers can do that too, and that's really, once again, like I said, even in my show with David Dwork, whoever advances past this round is really going to earn it too. But speaking of all that, we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to discuss more about coaching and the holes that not only they're going to plug, who's going to come back, the chess match, and why it could be personal for Paul Maurice. We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. Performing for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Back on this Monday, May 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Monday. So I want to talk about a little bit of the chess match, the lineups also for the Florida Panthers and the New York Rangers as the Panthers are getting ready to hit the ice in a little bit for practice at War Memorial. We'll talk more about that, what has been said. After that, in maybe Tuesday or even Wednesday show, got to figure out a few things before a Tuesday show because that is a little bit of a travel. I have a little bit of travel, so don't know if we're gonna have a Tuesday show yet. But that's neither here nor there. But for this series, Peter Laviolette versus Paul Maurice. With Paul, we've seen what kind of different lineups that he's put out there for the Cats. We've seen the fourth line insert Steven Lorentz, Kyle Okposo. I know Ryan Lomberg got sick in one of them, and you had to put one of them in, and also with Sam Bennett coming back, with how Lorentz and Kyle Okposo performed, you had to make the hard decision at the time to scratch Nick Cousins, who even though Nick Cousins was reinserted into the lineup in Game 6 against Boston, you know that you have those multiple pieces for the Panthers, and like David Dork even said, a fifth line. The Panthers do have a fifth line. For the New York Rangers, for Peter Laviolette's crew, one big change that he did make during the first 2 rounds was changing up the D pairs to put Keandre Miller and Jacob Trouba together versus having Miller and Schneider and then Philip Gustafson and Jacob Trouba together too. Like I said, the Corsi 4 favored the other team throughout the first 2 rounds, but New York gets more quality shots over quantity there. And it's funny because around this time last year, we were discussing the Carolina Hurricanes, how that was a team that was pinned in their zone quite a bit in the first 2 rounds right before the Eastern Conference Final against the Panthers. So it's for the New York Rangers, the fact that they have once again a backstop in Igor who can still stop pucks and incredible penalty kill. You definitely can. You don't necessarily always mind being in your own end. Their 5-on-5 goal differential is only +1. Their overall goal differential is +11. They have 4 shorthanded goals too. So just by that alone, you know what a big key for the Panthers is to get a win in this series. It's just 31% converting for them too. It's just they're fun to watch. Once again, you're going to have to earn it. But also, there's a connection with Maurice and Peter Laviolette. When Maurice was let go in Carolina in 2006, Peter Laviolette coached that team and brought them all the way to the Stanley Cup after defeating the Edmonton Oilers that year, too. And both of them have a pretty long resume, too, of coaching. Maurice has been in Carolina/Hartford twice, Toronto, Winnipeg, Florida. Laviolette has been in almost every team in the Metropolitan Division, New York, Carolina, Philadelphia, Washington, and now New York, but also with a little bit of a stop in Nashville, which for Laviolette, I mean, everywhere he's gone, he's had a little bit of success too. Stanley Cup win in 2006, Stanley Cup final appearance in 2010, right before that Patrick Kane goal that nobody knew went in. Losing to the Pittsburgh Penguins in 2017. And even when Barry Trotz left after winning the Cup in Washington, who was the guy who to replace to coach that veteran group at the time? Peter Laviolette. So we talk about recycled coaches here and there in the NHL, but there's a reason for it too. When you're trying to get something out of a group and you're getting a guy who's a proven winner. I mean, look at Toronto with Craig Berube. They still have a lot of lineup questions to answer before they even play a single game in October again. But that's a lot of a one big step when it comes to just trying to change everything up and have a different voice. Usually you go the opposite way of someone from the previous coach. That happens in all sports too. So, but for Laviolette's group, very little changes to that top 6 for them and in the forward groups too. For them, it's I want to go back to what Paul Maurice said back a few months ago when the Florida Panthers were trying to get goals off the rush and force things. And that's something that Paul Maurice was really vocal about in the media after a really bad stretch, is forcing things. But I believe in this one that if the Panthers are going to get their chances off the rush, I think this is a really good series for them to really get stuff and off the rush too. When it comes to disrupting play. And for New York, Bill Lindsay was talking about how of their 1-3-1 style in the neutral zone, and when you try getting the puck to the flank on a give and go, you have multiple guys there to disrupt for them. And what for the New York Rangers too, that's really what it's really gonna for the Panthers gaining the zone and getting in on your forecheck, because a lot of their goals in the season series came off that forecheck for them. And I know it says on the stat sheet that Matthew Tkachuk is leading the Florida Panthers with points, and Carter Verhaeghe is up there in goals and points too for the Panthers. But if they're not feasting in this series, because we didn't really see them feast in round 2, then I don't know how you're going to come out of the series if you don't have those two. Which Carter Verhaeghe, once again, in his way to use his speed and also get goalies on that short side, glove side, especially because most goalies catch with their left hand. To get past that part of the ice when you're using that upcut from going from the corner to the right wing circle too. It's crazy what kind of deception that Carter Verhaeghe has when he's bringing it up. You have multiple guys drawing to him, and you don't know whether he's going to do a cross ice or shoot to that short side too. So that's going to be another thing for the Panthers in order to get them past the New York Rangers, because Shesterkin, he's gonna come out, he's gonna ball. Sergei Bobrovsky, he's gonna. I feel like for him, this could be a series where once again he could not see a lot of he's probably not going to see a lot of shots. When you see these 5-on-5 numbers for New York and Florida, based on, and yeah, once the puck drops in game 1 on Wednesday, that could all go out the window, and you could see the New York Rangers at 5-on-5 dominate the play. But it's about for Bob continuing to be prepared for those high quality shots when you do get them. And listen, when you have the regular seasons that Bob has had the last few years, you're very confident that when you go a little bit of stretches where you're not seeing the puck, that you'll be ready. And it really comes down to, once again, his routine on and off the ice. First guy in, last one out too for him. He's constantly prepared for these matchups, and really for the Panthers, it's going to be once again come down to cleaning up your end when Bob does have that juicy rebound, because we've seen how he's a little bit prone to that. But Panthers, they've played really tight these last 2 rounds. I mean, I know in Game 6 that we saw that rush that the Boston Bruins finished based on overcommitting to the strong side and Charlie Coyle going on a rush. But for the Panthers, I mean, the fact that they stuck through that for almost a full 60, and you really only allow one chance. I mean, the Panthers' ability to hold that tightness in their own end and the gap control, it's really impressive to see how they can maintain that for at least a good majority of the game. And for the New York Rangers, where you have to force them a little east-west because of the contrasting styles, that's the word, contrasting styles with how these guys play. And I didn't even mention former Norris Trophy winner Adam Fox too. One of his goals came off an overcommitment on the penalty kill to one side. He goes up the slot and he scores past the screen of in front of Bobrovsky. He can kill you too from that blue line. And crazy to think that there's someone out there who's better than him as a defenseman, in Cale Makar too. Adam Fox is just one heck of a talent too. So multiple weapons that could kill you here in this matchup for the Florida Panthers. But it's going to be a fun challenge, as we'll see what Paul Maurice does with the lines, because chances are he's going to start Bennett on that third line with Luostarinen and Erod. I know, and crazy to think, with the conference final starting Wednesday, New York only has one more day of rest, and with the Panthers having 4 days off, it's basically a wash when it comes to rest. People are rest, recoup, and then you hit the ice. Both of them, there's not going to be a conversation of rest versus rust, because they basically have the same too. So that's definitely not going to be one a big talking point once puck drop does start on Wednesday night. But that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Check back here later this week as we will discuss and help you guys prepare more for this Eastern Conference final matchup between the Florida Panthers and the New York Rangers. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.